All right, good morning, everybody.
Recording in progress.
Calling to order the April 25th meeting of the Newton School Committee. Hello to everyone in the school committee chamber, which is a little bare right now, and to everyone joining us from home. As this is a special meeting, there will be no public comment. Last night, we had a very extensive conversation exploring committee member Chris Bresky's proposal. And to round out our conversation, we were joined by Maureen Lemieux, the Chief Financial Officer for the City of Newton, and Ann Berwick and Bill Ferguson, Newton's co-directors of sustainability. This morning, we will continue that conversation, but first I would like to ask our interim superintendent, Kathy Smith, and is Liam joining us? Yes. All right. Liam Hurley, who will join us momentarily, our assistant superintendent and chief financial and administrative officer, to provide the committee the latest updates regarding, morning, Liam, regarding additional funds that have been pledged to NPS and their recommendations to us regarding restorations permitted by those funds.
Liam, do you want to join us up here? Sure. Thank you, Tamika. So again, the mayor had shared with you, I believe last week on Thursday, the idea that we're going to be phasing out the Medicare Part B, which in terms of budget for this year is an estimated $680,000. So we also provided you last week with, at your request, were priorities if in fact additional monies were found and allocated to the budget. So you have in front of you two plans. One was thinking the first million, what would be our recommendation? And the second priority was a $2 million. So to lead you through that, last night I was frantically looking at, the monies and doing some calculations. And we did spend quite a bit of time, and I'm talking about our team. And the reason you see people not here is we're juggling a number of things. We just had a principal meeting ending. There's a couple of meetings that are happening right now. I know if we need them, they would be able to jump in. So I know Assistant Superintendent Aisha Farag ended up spending time with the principals, looking at classes throughout the district. And you see in front of you the recommendation of bringing back 5 FTEs, and that would throughout the district allow us to have no classrooms above 26, 27, 28 and beyond. So that would have addressed those classes. We also would have to bring back a 0.8 specialist for the adjustment of the additional classes. We also looked at the middle school, and we had a recommendation of bringing back 5 positions at Oak Hill, Day, and Brown. And looking at the multi-team increase, and I just spoke with Assistant Superintendent Roma, and I believe, Liam, we're going to adjust that to a 0.8. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that would match similar to, so that was a plug number before. So I think it's closer to 0.8 for the multi-team increase we've made.
So instead of the 1,021,200, what does that bring us to? I'm sorry, we've been doing this morning, so we're just.
It's just the difference there. So
So while Liam is doing that figuring, so one of the things we also would like to recommend, last night it was brought up in discussion, I can't even remember who brought it up, but there was talk about the charter maintenance. And there was talk about, again, how important that was, and it's important in any budget. When I look at the amount set aside with the number of buildings you have, it probably should be doubled that money to make sure that we do summer projects, continue. You've done such a good job highlighting your plans, your capital improvement plans for all of your buildings. That's a complement to that, to make sure that those buildings that aren't, in the capital improvement plan at this time continue to have upgrades, et cetera. But one of the things that we had talked about was looking at that amount of money. It's over 400,000. If you are able to add that back into the 680,000, it brings us to about $1.2 million, Liam.
yes. So
And our recommendation would be to bring back all of the positions on the first sheet, which takes care of, again, a number of the class sizes that you had concerns. And I would also recommend from the second sheet. And I want people to understand clearly, and I'm going to talk about the strings program. In talking to both assistant superintendents and our principals, obviously across the board, you knew what our plan was, to try to not impact any one department fully. And by doing that, that was one of the recommendations to the point of 1.5 positions. We thought the students would start later. Yes, last evening we had advocacy, but again, we clearly understand the importance, of these programs in the Newton Public Schools. And with the little bit of money left, if we were to add that back in, we would find a way to bring the strings program back. I'd have to get the figuring done, but we feel that from the second list, we could add the strings back. So at this point, those are our suggestions. Like I said, we came in this morning and have just started to really look at this.
Thank you for that, Kathy. We have, could you print the sheet that Kathy shared in her superintendent's update from Friday? Yes,
Yeah.
from the Friday packet.
So before Lisa goes off and does that, if Liam's making adjustments, is it possible to get the adjusted version printed, or is that too on the
Do you-
fly?
Do you have the adjusted version that you could?
Okay. Okay, forget it then.
Yeah.
Sure.
I apologize. Well, I was following on my computer, so I knew where she was pulling that from.
Can I make a comment? So Lisa's run out, Rajiv, to make copies of the so-called, Friday packet where we put together $1 million, $1 million. The one thing that we came together yesterday and we started to look at a number of things. Paul, I think you had posed the question and you had said to me, are these in order of priority? So, the first page, am I going to say elementary is a priority? Probably, as we start to look at our younger students, but obviously you see the importance of, our middle school additions back. When we went to the second page, we also spent yesterday coming back from the school vacation week, really taking a look, because I think the page that's going to be printed doesn't really show you the priorities listed. So, we immediately went and put in again class sizes at day, a multi-team increase, Brown multi-team increase, and then we brought strings in, and then the middle school literacy specialist. The reason why the literacy specialist, the additional one, where again, it's kind of a menu of options. If we weren't able to reduce some of the class sizes at middle school, that is an option to be able to support. We already have one literacy specialist. It would have given us the two. The other thing I want you to know, and I clearly understood this, and I ended up with an email from Jenny Klein Sosa. I had an opportunity yesterday with Josh Goldstein. Casey No Miller joined me for the conversation, and we actually had an excellent conversation. I'm always so pleased to work with our partners, the PTOC, our CPAC. And one of the things we've talked about, when you look at those lists and you feel that, you're missing something, that why, when we had reductions in special education. So I want to be clear about this. And like I said, we had a very good discussion. One of the things we talked about as a team, and we clearly are a team, I never find departments locking down, this is my area. I mean, people advocate, but we listen and we try to complement the things that we're doing. And the thought at the time was to look at class size, which really impacts all of our students, especially our most vulnerable students. That's not to say in being reflective, as you add back some of the middle school positions. So on that second page, and I haven't had a chance to adjust it yet, we would look at bringing for those teams, special education teachers for each of those teams. So it would be 3 special education teachers that I would add to the second list, and I would prioritize them right under every time you bring back a middle school team. So I just want to be clear about that, and especially our parents out there. We have a very large budget, as we should. supporting a student support services. But I just want people to understand these were difficult decisions and it was okay for us to go back and to take a look and, please understand we're working as quickly as we can as monies are identified.
Thank you. All right, Paul, go ahead.
Again, just procedure, Tamika. Thank you, Kathy. Personally, I think those are excellent suggestions. Tamika, I don't know if we need to vote to accept them or if Kathy would just modify her proposed budget that we ultimately vote on to include what she said here. Have you thought through how we do that technically?
I think it's essentially she has modified the recommendation, the budget
That's the way I see it,
recommendation.
right?
And so we kind of,
Is what it is.
it is what it is, and
Yeah. Okay,
we accept or
the whole thing. right?
exactly.
Okay, and thanks. I agree totally. And Kathy, I just want to say, just to be absolutely clear, if perchance we were able to find additional funds beyond the 400,000 and the 1 point something million that beyond the 1 million that we just talked about. Your priorities at that point would be the middle school class size ones, the literary specialists, and then the special ed,
I would, and again, I need to update this.
more or
sheet
less.
for you.
Okay,
But it would be 2 middle school class size teachers day, a multi-team increase at day. I would then add a special education teacher for that team. So every time so then you would go to Brown,
Yeah.
I would add another special education teacher for that team. So I clearly would have to adjust this list.
and that would, in total, roughly, maybe Liam, are we talking there about another $500,000 more or less?
For 3 additional special education.
For
or
that
2. Let me
next
say
level
2.
of priorities.
Liam, could you add 2, I'm sorry, 2 special education
Sorry, Liam,
teachers?
I know this is on the
No,
run.
that's okay. So 2 times the 92,000 is, 180, what is this?
So that would be added to the, again, when you look at that second. million.
184, yeah. So 184 for two FTE. So Paul, I don't know quite where you went down to, how many
I'm
total
not sure
FTE,
either,
if it was
truthfully.
5 or 6, if these were teachers.
Yeah, I guess, let me reframe the question. If perchance additional funds were available, given the most recent priorities that you've just discussed, what are we looking for in terms of gross dollars to cover those ones you just talked about? It feels like something in the range of 500,000 or 600,000, but maybe it's a little more. I'm not sure.
So Liam, you've got the calculator.
Yep.
I would add the 299. That takes into account the 2 I'm on the second page with the second $1 million.
Yep.
So 2.0, 184, the multi-team increase,
Yep.
115, that's 299. You see the next group for Brown.
Mhm.
That comes to 598, correct?
Yep.
Could you then add the 2 middle school FTEs, which you've given me a figure of 184?
Can you repeat that one more time? I'm not tracking.
Yeah.
I'm not
So,
even-
so what I'm reading off
Yeah,
of
the
is
second
separate than
page.
what you got on Thursday. It's prioritized.
I see.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
I know, and
Okay.
I will get this copied for you. So Lisa copied for you what was in the Friday packet.
Right.
We just made as I said, Paul reached out to me and said, Kathy, can we prioritize that second sheet?
That's what you're reading.
So I'm reading from that.
Uh,
So with our priority, we right away on the second $1 million
Yep.
said 2.0 middle school class size teachers, and we have day listed at 184,000. Because we're adding those teachers, we add what we call a multi-team increase at day at a 1.25. That was 115. That totals, and I will get you a copy of this, 299. I then dropped down and did the same thing at Brown. 2 middle school class size teachers at 184, a multi-team increase at Brown, 1.25, which brings that total for all of those middle school positions at 598. I then added the two special education FTEs at middle school for each of those teams. And Liam, you've told me that's 184.
184, so the total would be 782.
Okay, and I remember we took the strings out, which you see listed there, and I put it on page 1. So that leaves the literacy specialist, Newsella, the athletics, the music. I don't know if you need me to address that right now. I mean, you've got those figures.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Paul. Any, I'm sure there are many questions. Go ahead with Mayor Fuller.
Question on page 1, there are also middle school class size teachers. They don't need, I'll call supporting
Correct.
instructors with them, they're standalone.
Right now, those are standalone on the first page.
When you have that multi-team increase you have though, right? That was 0.8.
Yes, that's, and we
So they're
changed
not
that to a
standalone,
0.8.
yeah.
Yeah, so the multi-team would,
don't need this additional
Special, right.
Yeah, what does that, the multi-team go from?
that goes from the 27 to the 7360. So that's an increase of approximately $46,000.
I do wonder if it'd be helpful, like, I know you just said something about the multi-team, but I had a lot of questions from people about that. Just, I understand what has to be added, but I wonder if we should just say that again for the public, why you need to add more than just the teachers, what that includes. Could you?
I can take a stab at it, but I'd rather, I'd rather have Assistant Superintendent
Okay,
Roma.
we
come
can
in.
do it
Could we-
later. I had a lot of questions about that and what that meant. I mean, I would assume it includes all the extra, the specialist teachers and stuff that go with that team, but that's something
Yes.
that people don't necessarily understand.
I'm just texting to
So we
ask
can get
him
Toby to come in. And
Yep.
Stephen, I'm wondering if you have the prioritized list, if you could project that on the screens? If
I don't have a, no, I mean, we've just
it's
got these.
working on the fly, no worries, no worries.
Yeah.
All right, additional questions? Go ahead, Chris.
So Kathy, when you're talking about the middle school level, you have the first add back of 460,000 in aggregate on page 1. And now we're talking about a second at 782,000 on page 2, which you just detailed. What is the range of class sizes at middle school for just the first add back? And what is the range of, and I guess not just range, but really what is the distribution of class sizes at given just the first add back and then the distribution given the second add back?
So again, I know it's below the 100, which was our cohort. That was, I believe, the addition when we had first made the reductions. So I've got Toby coming in and he can give us the actual numbers. Okay, oh, good, right on time.
Morning, Toby.
Come up, please. I'm sorry,
Good
we have
morning.
questions about class sizes at the middle school and the multi-team increase, what that impacts.
Yep. In reference to the add backs
Yes.
or with the list, tell me what are the specific questions? I
So
can
this, so Chris,
on
maybe
topic.
you'd reframe it. I think maybe it's just this first round and the
Yeah.
second round.
Yes, so what is the distribution of class sizes at middle school? Assuming just that first add back, and then how does that distribution change given the second add back?
So the 5.0, the first one you're talking about? So 5.0 additions to middle school would add 2 teen teachers at Day, 2 teen teachers at Brown, both in the 7th grade, which have the largest team sizes and therefore class sizes of any of the teams, and 1 teacher at Oak Hill where they have a partial team where it's the only place where adding 1 teacher only at a school actually works in the middle school. So that's the 5. So that would bring those team sizes at Oak Hill And then the seventh grade at Day and Brown, which are all at 100 or 99 students per team, down into the low 90s, into a typical range. It would leave higher team sizes in the eighth grade at Day and Brown, I believe. I don't have my notes in front of me. So that is not included in that. And so then as you increase the number of team teachers, that's the equivalent in the elementary school of increasing the number of homerooms. And so as you add classrooms or add homerooms, add team teachers at the middle school, you need to add resources to the multi-team teachers or the specialist teachers that the kids go to when they're not in English, math, history, and science. And so we need proportional increases there. It's not a direct correlation because we have, based on the number of FTEs and the configurations of different schools and how many other teams there are on a grade where we're adding, the amount of multi-team increase can vary with that. So that's the 0.3 that was on the list is a low estimate. It might be as high as 0.8.
Yeah.
You mentioned that already. So does that help answer the question? Follow-up question, I'm happy to.
Yeah, so if I understood you, so the first add back, the 5.0
Yep.
is going to take teams that are currently slated to be 99 and 100 down to the low 90s. So we're talking something like that translates to 22, 23 kids in a classroom.
Right, which is our target.
Yep.
Typical target now. It's on the high end, but a typical.
Yep.
Still typical end of class size for middle school for those larger teams.
Okay, and then I'm not sure I understood on the second add back, the 4.0 which was two a day.
4.0 in the second million.
Yeah.
So that would add 2 additional team teachers at both Day and Brown.
Okay.
And those are in the 8th grade at Day and Brown, where the next highest mid to high 90s. I don't have the numbers in front of me. Team sizes were projected to be. And again, would similarly bring them down into a more typical range. And again, I think with those additional team teachers, we kind of tip over into needing even more multi-team teachers as we expand the number of team teachers or, homerooms and sections at the middle school to need more multi-team increases. So you see a proportionally larger increase with those in the second million.
Okay, so is this kind of same magnitude of we're talking taking class sizes from, more that 25-ish type level down to
Second million, similar, yeah. So they're at 20, they're more like a 24. These are taking class sizes in the middle school, averaging 24. And again, these are all averages. So when we say 100, it's not necessarily 25, 25, 25, 25. It can be 26 or 27 here, lower. It varies based on a number of different scheduling issues. So this is the next largest set of content area classes in the teams at the 8th grade at Day and Brown, and bringing them back down into more typical range from our current staffing levels.
Okay, so if we extract the concept of the average and think about it as a distribution, what's the maximum we're likely looking at under these scenarios?
If it with both sets of restorations.
We think about them individually as the first set of restorations and the second.
Yeah. So again, I don't have my notes in front of me. Sorry, I just ran in from another meeting. We were at, so we're eliminating the first set of re-additions of 5.0, and the multi-team that goes with that eliminates team sizes of 99 or 100 divided by 4, 25 students per class on average. And then the next one addresses class sizes that are 24 on average in that 98, 97,
right, but
96 range.
I wanted to separate the average from think about the distribution. Like, what's the maximum that we're looking at?
I can't guarantee what the maximum, it's going to be within a 90% confidence range, because again, it depends on a bunch of variables. When you build secondary schedules, it's not as straightforward as looking at an elementary array where you can just see, oh, there's the biggest class, it's right there. It's not going to be that print. So within an 85 or 90% confidence, then our max, you're saying. So if the range of a team size of 100 is actually 27 to 23, right? We're getting rid of those. We're eliminating likely 27.
That's my question. Yes.
And if we're getting to team size, and then so the first set of add backs of 5.0 eliminates the 27s, right? And then the next set of add backs eliminates that one probably gets the largest 27 sub 26s. The next set of add backs probably eliminates 26s and 25s.
Okay, that's the answer I was looking at. Thank you.
Cove, you also had some middle school related questions, or were those?
No, I think
addressed.
Toby answered. I just wanted someone to explain the multi-team increase because
Ah.
lots of people don't understand what that is on top of the teachers and how that cannot be a full body of a
Right.
teacher. So I think you explained that.
Thank you.
Other questions for Toby while Toby's here? Going once, going twice? Go ahead, Rajiv.
I had a question about the high school athletics, and I'm not sure Toby is necessarily the right person, but he's as close as we have right now.
Mm.
So Toby, the 5% restoration for high school athletics.
Yep.
Just wanted to confirm, I think when we first talked about it, the idea was not to cut specific programs or sports. It was a general reduction, which would be felt across multiple areas, especially in terms of coach availability and stipends and things like that.
So, yeah, we're still working on how, like the currently proposed 10% decrease to all of those, including athletics. So for athletics, we're trying to absorb as much as possible. So we're eliminating second varsity assistants and other expenses, intramural programs in between, conditioning programs in between seasons. We're not going to get all the way there. Some of our smallest, lowest enrolled sports would likely also be cut at the 10% level to make the full 10% reduction. If we adding back 5% and making only a 5% reduction to athletics, as well as the other extracurriculars and the arts and drama that are listed there, music and drama, would make it much easier to do, as you described it, simply shared, cutting across without any major impacts to one particular sport. But as we've looked at the details, 10%, it's going to be hard to get there without one or more teams being reduced completely.
Got it. Okay. So it's a little bit different from where we had hoped to be in the first time. we
Yeah, I mean,
discussed this.
I hope we were not too definitive in saying that would definitely not happen in our initial budget presentation 2 weeks ago, but it's, we continue to do more and more work on that with our athletic directors and Liam's office. And so it will not be possible at 10% without some pain that's felt more significantly in some sports than others.
Thank you.
Other questions for Liam? Good. Or I'm sorry, for Toby.
We're at the same place at the same time.
Well, thank you for jumping in, and if you have to run, we understand.
Jump back in if needed. So,
Yes,
okay, thanks.
thank you very much. So I'm looking to you guys. Are we have the recommendation, I think, totaling 1.2 million. Those are reasonably assured add backs that we can make with the funds that have been freed up to include in our NPS budget, correct?
Yes, just so to total those up a little more precisely, just to understand. So on the first page there, we've changed things around a little bit. The multi-team would would match the elementary, so that's 0.8. So that bottom line goes up to 1,067,200. And then adding the strings to that at 98,000 brings this add back list to 1,165,200.
That number one more time.
Sure, yeah. So the first million restoration right now says, which has a highlighted number of 1,021,200. We want to increase that slightly because of the multi-team increase. So that is at 46,000 is added to that number to bring that line to $1,067,200. And then in addition to add back the strings at $98,000 would bring this kind of whatever, this add back list. We're calling it our first million, but we're above that is 1,165,200. And out of that, we have, let's use $680,000 is the, we've been saying 650, but it's actually closer to 680 is the Medicare Part B. So we would then need to basically backfill that if this is the school committee's will of approximately $439,200 of the charter maintenance account. And I just wanted to take a moment and say that does have an impact. I think you guys obviously understand that, but that would basically be no summer projects. for us. And a couple of other challenges I would say to that is this, even in this year's budget, we were planning to add back the 410,000 plus a 3.5% basically increase for costs that have gone up. We didn't even add that in. So as we think about reducing this, when we think about the second part of the Medicare Part B phasing in FY25, if we want to ever do summer projects, I'm almost going to need that entire, or, my recommendation, at least initially, would be to almost take much of that money and put it back into charter maintenance in the FY25 budget. So I remember when we did this last year, the 410, I said, that's going to be very difficult for us to restore. We did that. And we remember it was kind of a paper cut. The city is picking up the costs this year. Thank you again for picking up those costs. But it did remove it from our line item, shifted the expense over to the city. Restoring it, we can see is difficult. So taking it out, which I think might be the right move, doing that now 2 years, kind of almost 2 years in a row without that kind of compounding is problematic. So essentially there would be no summer projects this coming year, which again, I don't know if I need, I don't need to remind you, but I will, that these buildings need it, from cosmetic to, lockers, ceilings, lighting, stairways, life safety things like that. I mean, we simply, and I think we'll be reporting a fiscal and ops to you folks on Thursday, and we'll again be showing, I think, a shortage of 450,000 in that account. So it is something that we've done in the past, and it is something I understand how critical this is, but it does have an impact.
So I have a quick question, and you touched on it a little bit. You said no life safety improvements over the summer. That would include safety issues.
Yeah, I mean, so again, we still have a multi-million-dollar charter maintenance account, and we do need to respond to things that are either not to code or broken or not repaired. We would look at things that might be an egress door. If there's emergency lighting, we need to do those things regardless, things that need to happen. There are certain things that we would like to do typically during the summer. If there's a stairwell or treads that may start to be worn, does that rise to that level? But basically it would be me instructing David Stickney to really reduce, any of the projects that he's got. If there are certainly critical life safety things that are obviously imminent hazard, we need to do them. And we would be doing those. We would be doing those regardless, even during the school year, if we've got that. We call them life safety issues, but certainly you've seen, obviously, the repair and maintenance on these buildings, particularly the older buildings, is significant. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
It does.
we would be needing to respond to life safety issues if it's real. There's areas that we would like to improve the life safety issues on certain areas of buildings, but certainly strobes, lighting, emergency lighting, stairways, things like that, we need to look at closely.
So essentially just the essentials, the absolutely
Absolute
strictly
essentials.
essential.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's a good.
And can I say also, we do realize, and we paid a lot of attention to eliminating, which was the goal, a structural deficit. We talk about a new superintendent coming in, an opportunity to review our district, to look at where things may need to be added or changed. So this does have an impact. Now, my thought is, Mayor, you've committed to phasing in. So 680 would be available next year, but the hope for that was there are a number of things that we're dealing with presently. And to be able to look forward to kind of resizing our budget right now or restructuring, that we would have, we would look ahead to FY25 in a more positive way. So it still takes us back a few steps. And in our conversation today, and I think it is important to say this, and I really thank you for last evening's meeting. It was informative. It was respectful. I certainly learned more listening to everybody and understanding why decisions are being made. But one thing that we want to make clear, and you know how pleased I was to come to this district. I shared with all of you, really heartfelt that coming to a district that valued education, that had programs I could only dream of. Looking at class sizes, looking at supports for your youngsters, looking at the forward thinking. And I talked about this on the so-called, I don't know if I can call it a campaign trail, but many of you were with me at all of the meetings with parents and community members. And Anping, you always quote me as, a premier education. And I meant that before I ever walked in these doors. And the one thing I think that we have to say here is while I appreciate the efforts that Mayor Fuller has made, Chris, school committee members really trying to think outside the box. Because when you talk about that premier education, we are talking about class sizes. We're talking about strengths. We're talking about making sure we're meeting the needs of our students. And although I come from a district where you had to live within your means or you suffered the consequences, when we talk about where we're at right now, it is very difficult when we talk about the rising costs that we shared with you from the beginning, all of the things that had impacts on our budget. But we clearly are walking away from, being able to offer that kind of an education. And when we look forward to, 3.5%, and again, we've worked really well with the city. I know the mayor and her team is looking continually to support the budget. But I think we have to be frank that if we are walking away from class sizes, if we are walking away from, programs, it has consequences for us as a district. And I don't have the answer for it. I know we went out and looked for an override, which certainly would have said that we value these types of things. We want to make sure that we have supports, we have the programs, we have the athletics for every student, especially those students that maybe that team that, Toby was just talking about eliminating means something, to our students. Emily, you shared with me the so-called no cup policy. I think it was for freshmen. And I love that idea that you get to belong, you get to try something. So I just want to caution everybody, and I know it's about the dollars, but clearly it has impacts on how we see ourselves as a district.
Go ahead, Anping.
I really appreciate this whole process, and I said a few times, it's very educational, intellectual, political, you can call it. Now, one thing, I hope I haven't missed anyone. Have we any thoughts on the UOD at all?
Clearly, the outreach from your community is not surprising. You're very proud of, almost 50 years, 45 years in the district. As I said, many of you were part of it as volunteers. We've certainly listened, to your community. Mayor, you stood beside me that day, and I stand behind exactly what I have been telling you all along. I'm careful not to, whether I use words like pause, we're looking at a budget right now that is very challenging. And this opportunity to pause still meant we would come to the table and look at some of the concerns we had, some of the delivery models. And I would like to tell you, Anping, that right now, and I'd be prepared maybe in a month, and this is beyond the budget process, we have our team already looking at curriculum, in all of our elementary schools. That happens every day, not just a couple of times a year. But that being said, when you talk about a task force, and that was said in good faith, to bring people together, there are wonderful parts of that program that I would love to strengthen and work together as a team. And I keep saying, I understand I'm leaving in 2 months. I have had some conversation with, Dr. Nolan going forward. And I believe she is committing to reviewing the program and trying to work together to make a more, how do I say, something that is happening every day in our schools, which we have continued to do along with understanding our differences. So again, it's not disrespectfully not in there, but at this time, it's just not a recommendation for all the reasons I talked about, whether we want to use the word pause, look at our task force, and be able to meet sooner than later to report back to the school committee what direction we are going in.
I just want to add a little bit. This is a very unique program, has a lot of legacies, which beyond what we can understand, and certainly hundreds and hundreds of emails, and I can speak loud and clear that community really value this. But also I understand in the past few weeks, I talked to people, I sit in the class to see what's going on. I understand the concern. And but
I think we should have a thoughtful process and probably we need to explain our rationale to the community if we decide this way or that way, because this will not go away. And I understand the strong passion, emotion, support. It's way beyond what we can understand as a regular school curriculum program. It's way beyond that. And there's some kind of special things we have to consider carefully. That's what I want to say. I understand my colleagues might have their thoughts too, but I don't know, this is a good time to talk or this is too early, too late. But I just want to put my thoughts here to share with everybody.
Point of order.
Thanks, Sanping.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I was going to recognize Cove and,
Point of order.
all right, go ahead, Paul.
As requested by the chair, I submitted a draft motion on this topic. And my point of order is to please defer discussion of the topic until the motion is made.
I think, no, you can make your motion separate from us being able to discuss the topic. Ping raised this question. You can make a motion now if you'd like to, but I think we can discuss and we can certainly, you can raise your motion when it feels appropriate to you. But we can certainly discuss it and have that same discussion again if it's merited. Cove, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask about where we were with that as well. So I'm glad that Ping asked that, and I was worried that I had missed since I missed part of the meeting last night. I would like to see, I was going to propose that get taken out of the budget discussion so that we can have a more full a more full discussion of the program. And I feel that since it is fairly small money, I know that we have a lot of budget constraints, that it's something that could be reinstated through other ways or through the public funding it or something else. But I feel that we haven't been able to understand. I mean, we've been literally bombarded with information about it from understanding our differences. We have our own personal experiences, but we really haven't had a chance, because it's been thrown into this intense process, to understand the implications of what we might have instead, how that might affect things. So I was going to propose that it get taken out of this budget discussion, knowing that it's small enough money that it's possible that it could be reinstated, I think. And that then maybe later in the spring, when we finish the budget in May or June, we could have some sort of a presentation or report from the school department about their perspective on it, as well as, any other task force or something else that gets done. But I feel that, I don't have much experience with this, but it feels like each year something happens that almost distracts us from the budget process because it takes on a life of its own, and that it's not fair to that topic to have to condense it into this time frame that's already very intense.
So Cove, I think that's a very cogent suggestion, and I think you're articulating essentially what Kathy is imploring us to do, which is or not us, but imploring as the path forward, which is to say, have a collaborative approach, working with the program itself, working with the administrative team to come up with what disability or instruction looks like in Newton, and who is our partner, and how we can do that. But I think you said it much more succinctly, and I think again, that would be something for us to move on. But I can't, if you would like to make a motion for that, we can certainly entertain it at the.
That we remove it from the budget process. So would the motion be that we remove it from the budget process, but continue discussions and ask for a presentation later this spring?
To be specific, the motion would be to remove understanding our differences as a line item from the budget process. Is that?
But with the understanding that there's still continued discussion and 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 some sort of a presentation about it, because I don't want to be the one saying, I don't want to be the one moving that it gets taken out and then it never returns and we don't discuss it again.
Okay,
Can I make a suggestion,
Yes.
Cove, that I think might be where you're going?
yes.
What if, again, I mean, I agree with you that it sounds like there's been this ongoing discussion, and absent hitting this budget wall, there would have continued to be an ongoing discussion. Is that a fair assessment? So we shouldn't truncate that discussion, let the administration and the folks from Understanding Our Differences figure this out on how we can all move together in a viable path forward. So the number is now, as I understand it, roughly $32,000. No,
Double that.
I thought there was private funding.
Sorry, so. If
Yeah,
I may
please.
say,
Go ahead, Rajiv.
Cove, very much agree with your suggestion. And in terms of what Chris just said, I've spoken with multiple people from Understanding Our Differences, as well as multiple people from the special education community about their concerns. Two things. My concern is that we didn't necessarily go through what I would think of as due process in terms of the decision to take Understanding Our Differences out of the curriculum. And I would love to understand more about the concerns, what else can be done, etc. I also do think that in Newton, we try and bring inclusivity into the classroom, and that has been in place alongside Understanding Our Differences. But there is a certain power to Understanding Our Differences in terms of the interactions, in terms of actually having people in the classroom who can talk about their individual experiences, that you cannot get with interweaving acceptance or inclusion into a curriculum. So I think there are strengths there. Like every curriculum or program, it could be improved. And I think that they're willing to have that engagement. So that's my statement on it. But to Chris's point, I spoke with members of the board, and they are willing to fundraise 50%. And I think, Paul, this came up as part of some of the discussions you might have had, which does bring the number down to about $32,000, with the rest being raised through a private fundraising campaign. So I think that's the number we're talking about. I have a major concern that if we cut Understanding Our Differences, it may get replaced by nothing. And we've seen this happen in neighboring school districts, and I feel that would be a big loss for us. So I don't know how we'd want to structure this, but I fully agree that it deserves more consideration, and
Well, there would be a cost if you bring in another program, there would be a cost for another program.
There would,
In theory.
which is why I'm not sure we'll see another one come in if
We cut that line item. I'm wondering if we can add a line item for some amount of money for whatever you want to name it.
Curriculum development.
So
Chris, sorry.
Go ahead.
yeah,
Chris
the
has a
suggestion I was going to make is to say, proceed with your motion, and I don't know if you want to just amend it, or I can add this as an amendment. Up to you if you agree. With the authorization, express authorization now for the superintendent to reallocate $32,000 from, insert blank. I don't want to use maintenance as a punching bag because, I don't agree that, cutting $400 thousand from maintenance qualifies as sustainable as we sit here and talk about sustainability. This is not sustainable for our physical infrastructure, and hasn't been for some time, and has been the punching bag over the years. So I think that's a problem we need to fix.
But
I'd feel better about 32,000 coming from there than 400,000 coming from there. But I would be willing to say, just to reallocate $32,000 from a chosen line item of the budget, I would be willing to give Kathy that discretion, or Anna, should the time come, that discretion, and have that as a formal part of the motion, so that there isn't the ongoing uncertainty about funding $32,000 And now we can just focus on what is the best path forward between the administration and understanding our differences.
And I would suggest up to being inserted, up to
Yes.
32,000.
Yeah,
Because
agreed. Yeah, agreed.
okay. I see a bunch more.
Talk
hands.
first, or
If these are suggestions on the motion that Cove is hoping to make, we can do that. Emily?
It's a comment, right?
Sure, of course.
So I agree with every single point that Rajiv made. I think the concept of pulling it out of the budget completely, I agree that I think that I'm afraid it'll never come back again. I also, I appreciate understanding our differences, willingness and ability to match depending on what direction it is we end up going, but it would also be good for their executive director to be able to keep going at least for a year until they figure out what their direction is, and also we figure out what our direction is. I think that another reason for putting the money in there is that realistically speaking, we're not going to have an answer by September. And I think having potentially something in place, while not perfect, is not a bad idea. I, like Rajiv, would be incredibly sad if everything went away and nothing came back. So.
Thank you, Emily. Kathy?
So my concern about the motion is, or my maybe concern / question is the motion to specify that the $32,000 that we would put in is necessarily a payment to UOD? I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about, are we spending NPS funds and sending that money to a third party, or are we using $32,000 to do curriculum development work?
well, I didn't say curriculum development work. I mean, it could be to purchase a different curriculum. I mean, we don't have other lines in our budget that are for a particular curriculum necessarily. I don't think. So I'm not saying that it would have to be used for understanding our differences. I think there's a difference between curriculum development that I feel that means we pay our own teachers to develop curriculum versus purchasing a curriculum. I mean, I would be skeptical of just paying our own, I would want to hear a plan of just paying our own teachers to develop this curriculum, because I think that's a very it's a longer term plan, and you would have the summer to do it, which might be possible. It might not. I don't know. And that's just the kind of work I do. And I know personally that it's hard to get teachers to do that work over the summer. So I don't know that that's a realistic plan for next year. Maybe it is in Newton. I'm not sure. But so, yeah, I would not want to, I'm not locking that into, I mean, I think that what Chris said is the discretion of the superintendent to decide what money goes, but that it would be earmarked for something about inclusion. I mean, I guess that's the right word. I'm not sure what the right word is. Disability inclusion.
And some of that work is already, as I said, going on. And like you, Cove, I've done curriculum development and written curriculum, and it's different than purchasing curriculum. I don't think they've landed. I know in conversations with my team that there are topics. So they've started to, talk about the differences with all people and how we play together and how we, work together, study. So there are themes that they're starting to develop.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree that a presentation to the school committee, to be fair, talks about some of the work we're doing. And I agree with you all along. And Mayor, I keep looking to you because you were there with me that day. And, I felt very strongly, and I called it a task force. We can call it, but it was to come together, and it was to look at the very things that you want to preserve. And like you, I have listened, to the community with people that have been presenters. And at the same time, the little bit of conversation I've had with Dr. Nolan, I love when she talks about our high school students, some of our students that have been through some of this, and infusing that into the program. I actually see positive happening, bringing people to the table, looking at what we do every day in our classrooms. And I understand we're accountable to you to share with you what we are doing. But at the same time, in good faith, talking about a program like Understanding Our Differences that has such a long-standing, successful history here with some concerns right now as we move forward. So I would hope that they would have that same good faith of coming to the table and seeing what we can preserve and how we can move forward together. At the same time, making sure that the curriculum in our classrooms is what we want for all our kids.
So in order to move us along, I think Cove.
Well, the thing is, we wouldn't be discussing this as a specific program if it hadn't been suggested as a cut. I
Correct.
mean,
Well,
we're not discussing other specific programs because they weren't raised as cuts, you know, it's like that. I feel like it's the distinction between like, we don't decide on the curriculum for the schools where we don't, you know, say you're doing
So-
this or that.
so
But because this has come into the budget process, then we are, you know, working on the budget. So that's why I don't feel like what Kathy's saying. I don't feel that we need to say that it will absolutely go to this or it will go to that. It goes to a bucket.
So
That's-
I'm thinking of it as the appealing part of what you captured was to remove this discussion from the budget process. But in order to do that, we need to place hold 32,000 up to 32,000 for some type of disability inclusion efforts or instruction program, whatever. So perhaps you can tailor a motion along those lines and we can vote on that.
Can I just say, if
Go ahead,
Kathy,
Paul.
if Kathy proposes that, we don't have to vote.
That's also true. Sure.
Okay, and I clearly understand what you're saying.
So if you include a line item in your budget revisions or updated budget recommendations for disability inclusion up to inclusion up to $32,000, then it would just be part of the overall package that we would be approving.
Are you comfortable with that?
Very comfortable.
Because I'm
with that.
happy to raise it otherwise.
Okay.
Very comfortable. And some of that was part of the discussion yesterday with Josh and Jenny, understanding how important, you know, they tell their own stories about their students and really in a very positive way, but also that there's work to be done. So again, to.
Well, and I know that they want a play. I mean, I know that the CPAC would like to see a placeholder.
Correct.
As well.
That's exactly where I was going.
Unpaid, go ahead.
I appreciate this discussion and very wise input, Paul's, you know, including yours. I would willing to say that probably I would take your advice. Last time you said we have task working group to look at this, because once again, with this cut, I don't think the committee had a chance to understand the overall complexity and certain controversy. Let's admit that, yes, but this will give everybody a chance. And probably this will be 1 year's funding at this moment. And then we'll come to agreement. I understand our school committee does not have purview to look at specific program. I understand that part. So I appreciate Cove's thinking about that. But this is something, I think this is a wonderful way to move ahead. And 1 year, and they come together, and then we make a final decision with our new superintendent come here, and the committee, and CPAC, and then the programs, you know, directors. One thing I understood, I learned, there are 2 coordinators for the UOD, and they will partially pay. So that's when talking about the funding, and I believe that's important for them to have this sustainable, you know, people to work specifically for this program. So again, I'm glad to hear that proposal, and I appreciate if our superintendent would take this, and that we can move on now. And because we don't want to let this kind of delay our whole budget process deliberation.
So again, it's $32,000. So we're going to have to work with our team to identify where that comes from.
Okay, so, thank you. Paul?
Well, I have 2 motions on the budget of greater amounts, but I think we were deferring Chris's motion from last meeting. So I would.
So any other final thoughts on UOD? I think we've landed in a good place, very good, nimble thinking. on your Park Cove, and Paul with the suggestion that Kathy make that additional recommendation as part of the budget. I think that was good. So following up on last night's discussion, we now know that rating our own budget, and in combination with the funds promised from the Medicare Part B, we are assured of 1.165, 200 thereabouts million funds for the NPS budget. I think that's our current status update. Chris, you raised some additional proposals last night. Where do you see those falling at this point? And how would you like to move forward with your recommendations?
Sure. So, what I had discussed last night was $1.35 million, which was the $2 million of add backs minus the 650, or I should say up to an amount not to exceed $1.35 million. Hearing the maintenance taking a chunk of that honestly doesn't feel great to me. If I would have thought of absent what I've proposed, if I would have thought where that was going to come from, I probably wouldn't have picked maintenance first. That's just me. Given, it has been underfunded habitually year after year. And I think it does play into the concept of sustainability in terms of maintaining our infrastructure. Maybe short-sighted in some ways of, negative IRR of, deferred maintenance. So from that perspective, I would feel more comfortable moving forward, proposing something along the lines of the original 1.35. And I'm prepared to do that if you would like me to.
Choice is yours. We'll entertain it either way. I think. Yes.
Well, I guess in that case, I move that we authorize the superintendent and her team to reallocate the line item of 3.75% OPEB contribution in an amount not to exceed 1.35 million, with a remaining OPEB trust contribution of 1.8 million for year 24. The fund shall be reallocated towards the school committee's agreed upon budget priorities, including maintaining reasonable class sizes, and specifically toward the restoration of items provided to the school committee in the memo from Superintendent Kathy Smith dated April 21st.
So we have a motion by Chris. I cannot repeat that, but you all heard it. Okay, lovely. Is there a second? Second by Paul. We can now open it up for discussion specific to the motion. Mayor Fuller.
I sent off to Stephen and Liam a chart that I just want to, I don't know if one or the other could pull it up. I've got hard copies here to send around. If the school committee is uncomfortable with prudent and necessary, you know what? I forgot to keep one. Can I share one with you, Kathy? Yeah. Funding. Thank you, Chris. Sean and Liam may prefer to have one. We are way behind other AAA communities in funding our retiree health insurance. This is not a kind of a nice to do, it's a must do. It directly impacts millions and millions and millions of of funding that we need to work towards and that I'm committed to. I am happy to take the entire $3.1 million out of the Newton Public School budget. I will assume the risks. I will assume the costs over on the city side. So that happy to take this motion just off. I'll make an amendment to the motion. It's up to you, all of you. Give me the risks and the responsibility for the Newton Public Schools retiree health care insurance. I'll take it all on. Just transfer it over to me. I'll take the funding. I'll take the costs. You guys don't have to worry about it anymore. And it would be, let me think, the motion would be, if you prefer, I'm up to you. I would keep in mind that the way we have been managing it, the OPEB costs do not increase at your allocation rate. They're lower. So if you want me to take it on, you won't be getting the allocation from me and future mayors on top of it. I have no problem, but just the whole thing should switch over and have the city manage it. Here, I've got the dollars right here. An amended motion is just switch over to the cities. $3,187,252 that was in your budget. Just switch it back over to me. We'll rearrange the allocation. It will be my responsibility from now on to handle retiree health insurance for the Newton Public Schools and for the future. You guys don't have to worry about it. It'll be on me.
So thank you for that discussion. We have a motion and a second, and that opened up the discussion with information that was useful for us to have. It is not, to my understanding, a motion of your own at this juncture.
I'm putting forward an amendment to Chris's motion.
So if it's an amendment to the motion, we'll need a second on the amendment. Second by Paul. All right, and we will
Unfortunately, you have to do my amendment.
yes, take up
first.
your amended
Is the way it
motion
works.
first.
And
Just getting to
whatever-
that.
Whatever the will is, but
Yep.
we need to fund, and we're only, we're behind on funding this. It is the responsibility of the school committee to fund this, even in these difficult times.
So discussion on the amended motion. Go ahead, Rajiv.
Mayor Fuller, I think it's either you or Liam will know. At what rate does OPEB go up annually?
So it depends, but it has always gone up below 3.5% while I've been mayor. I've been very careful to slowly increase us. We're at 3.65% right now. It should be at 8 for every person that we hire. Let's say it's somebody, for round numbers, it's $100,000. We should be putting aside an additional $8,000 while they are working here each year towards what we're going to have to pay them, because we're getting their services today. That's when you set aside the funds. Right now, we're only at 3.65%. Do I have that right, Sean? And we've been inching it up slowly. So it's growing at a much lower rate. Now, NPS has new employees and there's all sorts of things, but it's financially better for NPS to keep all of it, given where everybody understands where I am on this. But I have no problem just taking it all I'll take the risk. I'll deal with the percent increases. School committee now and in the future will not have to worry about this. I would encourage the school committee and the bargaining team to always remember when they're hiring somebody, the costs are larger than their current wages. You have to think about what we owe for pensions and retiree healthcare. But we'll deal with it.
So we're saying it goes up by 3.6%?
No,
Yeah.
that's it goes up in tiny, much smaller increments.
So we've got, it's a complicated piece. So the piece that I just want to make sure, and John can chime in on this, he was involved when I think the OPEB kind of came into the school line item, maybe in around 2012. And at
This
that,
was under the Warren administration for the first time. The first mayor who ever said, we have to start funding this. It's the prudent thing to do. And I've picked up the baton.
so FY13, and what I think is, there's a few different pieces of growth that I think that's worthwhile talking about, and Sean kind of describes it as a bell curve. So right now, for the FY24 budget, the plan was to actually have 3.75% of somebody's salary who takes health insurance. So,
And who was hired after the date that OPEB started. So there's basically two cost drivers. There's, from the moment that OPEB started, immediately the base of people who had that deduction grew very rapidly because the first group of people who had that OPEB deduction began in that year, FY13. So that one growth rate is that every year we hire new people, the people who have retired or left our system are leaving without OPEB, and more people are coming with OPEB. And as the years have gone on since FY13, that has slowly lessened as each year more and more people now are leaving the system who already had the OPEB deduction. Of course, the employee never pays this deduction. We just set aside funds. Aside from that, that percentage is also increasing. And I guess you could say the third thing is if we add FTEs, that also increases the base. So I think the actual increase for our budget for next year is 6.5%. So we're still not at that break even where enough of the base has OPEB yet. We still have people who have not retired who we don't pay OPEB for. So I think it's true. The rate itself is not going up very much. It's only going up 0.05%, but the base is still growing and will still grow for a while, probably for a number of more years, such that if the rate wasn't changing, we would still probably have growth above 3.5% until that base finally levels off.
And I am happy to assume that risk and that cost. Just switch it over to me. Eventually that is not in, oddly enough, NPS's financial interest, but I'm happy to take this on. Hand it all over to me. Your decision.
may I ask just the clarifying questions, and maybe, I'm sorry, I don't mean
And
to
if
take
we
the school
need
committee.
Maureen, by the way, I can ping her.
Yes, you may.
She's available.
Just a couple,
So-
and again, these may be questions school committee wants to ask.
Go ahead, Liam.
If you took that on, Mayor, in FY24, would you then, are you also saying, and I think this is what you said, you would be then reducing our
Yeah.
allocation by the 3,187,252?
Exactly. You
Okay.
just switch it over to me. It's I'll take the cost we'll just transfer 3.1 million out of MPS over to me but I'll take the cost with it. So
Okay.
all of it shifts over my responsibility. Future mayors will just work with it within the city budget.
And then I guess,
I don't think that's in NPS's long-term self-interest. I'll tell you that, but I'm happy to do it
Additional questions, Liam, and then we have
Just the
Cove
last
and
one, and
Emily.
maybe this is what you're driving at, is just then the allocation, which again, previous to this has been that we would be growing, again, can't promise
Yeah.
forever, but 3.5%. So how does that change future allocation?
And again, happy to bring in Maureen. My sense would be it would be on the smaller base. Because I'm gonna take over all those costs, all those risks, any increases. So the 3.5% on a smaller base. for
Okay,
the
so it's
following year.
reduced 3,187,000, but then budget, whatever the new
Exactly.
267 is then growing at 3.5,
Right,
you know.
which is smaller dollars,
0.5%.
because I've got to absorb the increase on OPEB rather than NPS. So I'll take the risk, I'll take the costs.
Emily, you had a point of order?
Quick point of order, unless I'm wrong, I'm fairly certain that Chris needed to agree to the entertaining of the motion. No?
No, it
Okay.
doesn't.
Nope.
Good,
Sorry.
Thank you. Just making sure.
Robert's Rules of Order. It
They get
doesn't.
tricky. Go ahead, Cove, you had a question,
I
and
mean,
then we'll.
yeah,
start.
I was just confused by the different numbers that have been thrown out here. So you're saying that we fund this chart that you gave us, we're funding it at 1.7%. Other towns are funding it at 25%. But then how does that fit into, so you're saying overall, but the school department says they're funding each person. So that's, I mean, I understand that these are probably different numbers, but I mean, it's just a lot to.
Yeah, it's a very arcane, tricky stuff. People like Liam and Sean and Maureen know it inside and out. I'm pretty good with it, though. I know it pretty well. These are different numbers. We have an unfunded liability for our retiree healthcare insurance right now at about 400 million, round numbers. We are only what's called 1.7% funded for our liability. We've set aside very, very little money for a big liability. Other AAA communities in Massachusetts are way ahead of
Or
us.
25%
They're
funded.
25%
So they're not fully
funded.
funded, but they're
We
25.
are climbing up a big steep mountain. We're way behind. We're waving from down below at all those other AAA communities who are a quarter of the way up the mountain, and we're still, we barely got out of base camp. So this is, we've got a
So the ideal that you
30-year
would want,
strategy
that-
for dealing with pensions, dealing with retiree healthcare. We're on this journey. And the suggestion is, because of our current budget situation, which is incredibly difficult, we get off the journey for a while, if not, but I don't know how you get back on the journey.
Cove, wrap up the thought, and then we'll.
and then ideally, we would want to work up from this 3.68 that we're funding it to 8%. It sounded like, although it sounded like you wouldn't need to do that. Like you said that we should be spending 8% of each person we hire. But you said that it should work up incrementally, but because you're balancing this thing, it's not going to work up to 8%. for each.
I don't think you understood that quite
Okay,
correctly,
sorry.
but let
Maybe
Sean
it doesn't
try it.
matter. Let's just continue the discussion.
Rajiv, go ahead.
If you don't mind, I'm just gonna play back what I heard, right? Every time we hire someone, we take on, there is responsibility for some future payments to them to address expenses related to healthcare and retirement. And that's part of what we offer our employees, and it's something they're counting on. OPEB is the trust fund for those future payments. And an actuarial analysis, Mayor Fuller, I think, shows we should have more money in it. Right? We're good so far. When we're talking very tactically about the budget right now, there's $3.1 million in the budget for this coming year that is intended to go into OPEB. That number, my understanding is actually the following year will go up by 6.5%. Because that's part of the current budget plan, which is quite a bit more than the 3.5% increase on average. At some point in the future, based on the factors that Sean laid out, it will not be growing as fast. We're not at that point yet. So very tactically, it seems like if Mayor Fuller is willing to take on responsibility for OPEB and have it move over from the NPS books to the city books, there are two things that happen. One is that our denominator for the total NPS budget changes because our budget will go down by that amount. However, looking forward 1 year, we would have the combination of the, say, 3.1 million being multiplied by a 3.5% increase, but still be on the hook for a 6.5% increase in OPEB payments. So having that in the denominator doesn't necessarily free up, at this point, funding for anything other than OPEB in the future. Does that make sense? So at some point in the future, when we get to the other side of the bell curve, what we would be looking at is the OPEB payments from NPS, if we're still holding on to them, increasing at a lower rate than, say, the 3.5% increase in funding that we see annually. But we're not at that point of the bell curve. We're climbing up the bell curve right now. Sorry, go ahead. Please correct me on.
So the only thing I would add is that it's the point, one part is the base, right? And that's growing on the bell curve, and the other part is the rate. And I think to be fully funded some future date, instead of the 3.7%, I think what you're saying, Mayor, is it would need to be 8%. So we've been the city's been very incrementally increasing the rate part of it by only a 0.05%. But we don't know what the future is on that. So when the base levels off, the rate could still could increase more dramatically. I mean, at some future date, the whole liability is funded. And then I think it's true, but I think it's always those two factors. So there have been years where the rate has been kept level. But in most recent years, we've been going up by the 0.05%. There were some years in the beginning when it went up by more than the first year it went up by from 0 to 2.5% and the base started kicking in. So there were years where the rate itself increased faster. So it's a combination of the two. Once the base levels off, it depends on whether the rate incrementally increases at that point less than 3.5%, or if the rate starts to increase at a bigger amount at that point too.
So
Thank
Rajiv,
you, that's helpful.
I'm gonna jump in, Kathy, and then Chris.
So I have a question about what Rajiv just said, and the piece I'm confused about is the 6.5% increase in our OPEB contribution for next year. Where does that come from? Because I don't think I
mean, we could
missed
we could provide detail, but as I mentioned, so if you imagine back to like FY13, the liability in itself is different from the budget itself. So the budget works as starting in FY13, every new employee that took health insurance, at that point in time, it wasn't 3.7% now of their salary is set aside. And that's what this has grown to, this 3.1 million. And so then in FY14, FY15, every year we hired new employees. A few of the people who we weren't paying on in OPEB who were hired prior to that year left. So the base of the employees who had that charge going into the trust grew very rapidly, sort of like a bell curve. And we haven't hit the top of that year yet. So we still have people who retire or resign who we don't pay OPEB on. We haven't reached that point. There's that increase, which is when you couple that with the rate increase, we're still increasing faster than we're 3.5%. We're at like a 6.5% for next year.
Okay.
Also, if we add FTEs, we're adding not just that sort of change, but we would be adding even more positions. So all those positions are usually new hires. So in those years where our enrollment was increasing, we were adding positions. Not only were we replacing the people going out, but we were also increasing our FTEs. it's almost like three factors. So we haven't hit the bell curve. The rate itself is also a factor. The rate is only increasing very small, 0.05% at the moment.
Okay, so from a tactical perspective, for the next, if you're looking at the next 5 years, is it fair to say then that we are still on the upslope of the bell curve and that our
On the upslope.
year over year,
Right.
we're looking at increases in our OPEB line item to the extent we have it of somewhere in the neighborhood between 6.5 and something slightly higher than that percent?
I would say yes.
Mayor Fuller and then. Chris.
Perhaps a clarifying question, just to say what Sean said, using slightly different words. When Mayor Warren first instituted this, I think it was FY13, the 2.5% was only for the new employees at that time. So you had, let's pretend you had 300 new employees for that year. Is that directionally correct? How many new employees a year usually? What's your turnover rate?
It can vary, but with AIDS, it can be a couple hundred, yeah, two to 400. I think would be,
And
yeah.
plus, that was a time where enrollment was growing dramatically. So there were the turnover plus the new employees. And even with enrollment declining, we've been adding FTEs every single year in the last 5 years while enrollment has been going down. Do you know, we have roughly 2,500 employees. Do you know how many are on the OPEB pavement offhand?
I want to
once
say
heard
it
that
may be
number.
up almost to half.
Right. So we've still got another, let's say, another 1,200 employees. And if we're turning over at 200 or 300 a year, about 4 more years before it starts leveling off. So.
Chris, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, I was going to sort of make that point of, if you thought salaries and wages were going to increase at 3.5% a year, this item, absent a change in the rate, increases at 3.5% a year, except it'll increase a little more because our proportion of employees hired after 2013 relative to the total will increase. You know, this is a long way off from ever being funded. I mean, you know, the city isn't going to start making meaningful contributions here until the pension's funded currently in the 2031, 2032 timeframe, something like that. So I would think you would see the rate of growth here exceed the rate of the budget for quite some time, would be my expectation. I think you also will see the, you know, in terms of I would guess, over the past 10 years, the percentage of employees opting into our health programs has probably only increased as the gap between what we offer and what is available in the private sector has only widened dramatically since, certainly since Obamacare. So, you know, and anyone who is an employee that has a spouse in the private sector is almost certainly going to take our health insurance. However, I don't want to miss the bigger point here of the mayor's amendment. So the mayor is suggesting that we punt the $3.187 million to the city and receive a $3.187 million reduction to our allocation for a net reallocation of funds of zero. I am proposing a reallocation of $1.35 million. And that is the most substantial difference between the original motion and the amendment. I, again, recognize, given the mayor's 51 cards, that she will have the ability subsequently to unilaterally deem that reallocation or the appropriation, of funds. I recognize that. But I just want everyone to be clear on what the key difference in the amendments really is.
Thank you, Chris. So we really don't have a tremendous amount of time. I think very quick, short, final points. Go ahead, Paul.
I'm gonna vote for the amendment, and then I'm also gonna offer additional motions to make up that difference that Chris has so correctly indicated remains.
Mayor Fuller?
And I don't want anyone in this room or in Zoom land to misunderstand my deep commitment to the teaching and learning here and the students, and my keen sense of what difficult situation we're in. But it only makes sense to move the entire 3.1 if this group decides to take a portion of it. I'll move all of it over and assume this liability, so assume the increases. So that is where we'll end up.
Thank you.
I have an important clarifying point.
Sure. Go ahead, Chris.
So if the mayor's amendment would pass, the $3.187 million is no longer effectively a line item in our budget.
Correct.
I presume therefore, the original motion is not valid anymore. We don't have anything to vote on.
You would be urged to withdraw it. Yes.
Well,
There's nothing there.
I mean,
Yeah.
well, no,
There's
the
nothing-
motions,
okay.
the motion stands. The fact that it's moot. I would,
I don't know.
I would urge us to just, you withdraw the motion because it's moot. Because it has been made, it has been seconded. I wouldn't say we're overruling with an amended motion
Yeah.
that
I'm not, Jill, can we ask Jill first?
all right.
Discuss.
All right. Yes. It's been moved and seconded.
Well, I guess the real question is, and I'm not certain of this under the rules. If a amendment invalidates the original motion, what happens? Or is that even allowable?
How about let's thought process that in a moment when it becomes relevant. Yes, so I haven't shared my feelings on the amendment. I am gonna do that very quickly, and my feeling is I heard the mayor articulate that this would not be financially prudent for the Newton Public Schools or Newton Public School Committee to do. I heard Maureen Lemieux last night articulate many times, as well as Ann Berwick and Bill Ferguson articulate the many ways in which the city picks up. Wow, I'm really popping my piece. Sorry about that. Picks up some of the costs that the Newton Public Schools incur throughout the years, over the years. Recent mind, I'm thinking about our EDCO payment that the city picked up and transferred off of our books onto theirs. Most recently, the litigation matters that were settled. I think all of this to say there are times when being partners and shouldering burdens that and finding ways to kind of shoulder those burdens works out to our advantage, and the city does come in and assist when necessary. I think in this case with our OPEB liability, it is a responsibility that is incurred from the Newton Public Schools. In my mind, it is proper for the Newton Public Schools to pay that. I realize it's an exercise of shifting pieces on a spreadsheet, but it is our responsibility. So I would be in favor of keeping that here. And if I could extend it to Chris's suggestion, I think we have made up, I lost my notes, 1.65, 200. They've done that. That restores a lot of what you were looking to restore with your motion. I think we have those funds available. We use those funds. We don't need to probe or pierce into OPEB. Those are my thoughts, but we have an amended motion. We have a second on the amended motion. We'll now take a roll call vote on that. And we'll go reverse. Oh, Cove. Ward. All right, I gave you a chance. All right, Ward. Ward one,
This is specific.
the amended motion, yes.
Yes.
Can I ask a quick question? And I,
252, was it?
okay,
Which is our OPEB line item to the city.
yeah. But what's the financial impact on our current budget? That's why I want to know.
It would be
So no,
it would remove that 3.187 million from the NPS budget. We wouldn't,
so will not impact any other things we have talked about, whether we increase or decrease, no clear impact,
correct.
okay?
So we were at Ward 2,
No.
Ward 3,
Okay.
Ward 4, no. Ward 5,
Oh, yes.
Ward 6,
Yes.
Ward 7,
Yes.
Ward 8,
I guess yes.
and Mayor Fuller.
Yes.
So Lisa, I really did a poor job of keeping count. I think I counted 2 noes, 1 abstention.
6-1.
Okay, so that motion carries. And thank you, everyone. All right, Chris, our thought exercise is upon us. Do we remove Jill or? All right,
Since
any further discussion on the original motion? No? Rajiv, yes, go ahead.
So just want to, the reason I voted yes is because even just looking at a year forward, it's a $93,000 benefit to the NPS budget to not have the OPEB, line item in our budget. And I see that continuing for years, right? So it makes sense tactically. However, it takes away the opportunity to add back funds. And my understanding right now is we're looking at 1165 or 1.165 million, of which 480,000 is funded, still leaving around 440,000 to be found somewhere. And if it, right now we're using the punching bag of the maintenance budget for that 440K, which is going to, as we know from, again, many years of experience, I think is going to come back and bite us. So I think we still face the challenge of if we want to bring back just the first tranche of add backs, we're not there yet. We'll have a large gap.
Meaning we're not there absent the 480, so from charter maintenance.
Yes, I have, along with, I think, all of us actually have a lot of discomfort with that because we know we're going to need that funding.
Paul?
Also want to point, it sounds like we're negotiating against ourselves. This isn't new money that Kathy has just found, the 400,000, and we still haven't addressed page 2. So I'd like to make 2 motions. The first motion is to reduce the budget of the IT department by $500,000 to be decided by the superintendent. Although I would have suggestions there, and to reallocate those funds to the items included on the documents provided by Kathy Smith on April 21st.
Say that second part again, on April
To reallocate
21st.
the funds towards class reduction, class size reductions.
So would it
proposing
be fair to
half
say the second page?
well, wherever they turn out to be
Okay.
now. but I guess
Okay.
The point is to work on the class sizes. So the motion is to reduce the IT budget by $500,000 and reallocate it to help reduce class size.
Is there a second on the motion? I hear no second. The motion,
I'll second it because I want to hear this out.
all right, there's a second on the motion. We can open it up for discussions specific to that. What were your thoughts, Paul?
We have documentation of all kinds that indicates that class size is the predominant determinant of academic performance, social emotional behavior, and the like in our schools. The budget before us still is deficient in reducing class sizes in the middle schools. We do not have documentation that the funds we spend on our one-to-one program and other aspects of information technology produces comparable results for our students, either academically or in terms of social emotional development. We're facing a shortfall, and I'm simply proposing that where we know something makes a difference, it should have priority.
Go ahead, Chris.
So here's how I'm thinking about this. We have just, as a committee, ensured that none of the alternative funding, if you want to call it that, will come from OPEB. But we still have a budget in front of us that does not address our priorities that we agreed on last December. The first of which was class sizes. And so from that perspective, and I don't know if I would think about this amendment, I'm kind of thinking about this in real time, but I think there has to be a reallocation of some sort. You know, in instructional technology might be a reasonable area in terms of, you know, not that direct impact on students the way sitting in a classroom with 29 kids or 27 kids is going to have a direct impact on students. I would, and Paul, I'm willing to hear your thoughts on this. I would maybe think about an amendment to the motion to restore that amount we deem necessary, instruct Kathy to reallocate that amount we deem necessary to achieve that specific budget priority, which is going to be most of what's on page 2. And to come back to us with her suggestions as to those items that would be reduced, that would have the least impact on student experience. And I'm thinking about this in a couple ways. You know, there's things like instructional technology. There is potentially those, let's call it, you know, sort of mid-levels of administration, which not to say there aren't very important functions being done there, but some of those functions are kind of continuous improvement type things where we're in, you know, we're continually improving our curriculum, our delivery methods, and you know, that's incremental year over year. And if some of those things were to go away for, you know, what I still think is a 2-year period before we can achieve sustainability, and I'm still happy to talk about that in numbers, the run rate of where we are might have a lesser student impact and a more equitable student impact than taking certain cohorts of kids and sticking them in a classroom with 27 other kids. So I guess maybe I can punt that back to Paul to hear what his,
The amendment,
I'm sorry?
would that be a friendly amendment then?
Yes.
Paul?
I accept the friendly amendment. Thank you. So the amended motion, I think would be that to request the superintendent to revise the budget to include the amounts indicated this morning for Dave Brown, for the middle schools with regard to class size, and to report back to us as to where those funds were reduced in other line items.
So it looks to me like $782,000.
Correct.
Exactly. Now I have another motion that
Could I,
might help you get there also in a minute.
sorry, could I add one thing that I said that you didn't say in your motion? To add back with the least the least impact on student experience, something of that nature.
I think
And
that's what,
the motion is just now to make Kathy redo the budget, because we took away where she would find it from.
Correct. But it gives her the discretion to scrape where she rate other areas. Paul is suggesting other, and others are suggesting other than charter maintenance, or up to and including in Chris's mind. I don't know.
I can respond to
That
that.
sounds more confusing.
Yeah, so Cove, what I'm conceiving here is we agreed back in December, class sizes was our priority first and foremost, and that is the thing that affects a kid every day, all day. There's no substitute for it, and I know you and I agree on that point. What's in front of us is something that has, in my mind, clearly placed priorities elsewhere. You know, I felt the least resistive path to get students what they need, and that priority was to go the route of OPEB, and the committee disagreed with me. So now I'm thinking we are effectively going to have to punt this back to Kathy and say, come back to us with a clear priority on classroom size.
But are we also saying that we don't want it to come out of the maintenance budget?
it already has.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because that's what we're saying right now, right? We don't want, they are proposing that it would come out of the maintenance
For
budget.
page one.
For page one.
Page one.
We're talking about the incremental 782,000 from page 2.
I've lost track of who is next. Kathy, you usually have a cogent way of summarizing things.
So-
Go ahead, Kathy.
I am perhaps confused about which bucket we're talking about, because in my mind, I feel very differently about the restorations. Let's call them the page one restorations. I understand strings is now page one. So I feel very differently about the page one restorations than I do about the page two restorations. And I feel if what we are talking about is a motion that would say that is proposing a reduction to the IT budget in lieu of a reduction to the charter maintenance budget, I feel very differently about that than I would about a reduction to the IT budget to fund page two things. So I think what I need to understand is, are we talking about the page one issues or the page two issues?
We're talking about the page two issues, the
Okay.
$782,000, which is related to the middle school class sizes. And I was accepting Chris's friendly amendment to not specify from which department that would be taken.
Okay.
In other words, that would be up to Kathy and her team to recommend to us.
Okay, so in that event, my question then becomes so what we're talking about is sort of trying to alter the current proposed budget to find basically 4 FTEs plus multi-team increases to increase or to decrease the team sizes in 8th grades at Day and Brown. And so what I would like to know before I essentially decide whether I agree to take a scalpel to other sections is how would the team sizes under the current version of the budget without those add backs compared to our last 5 or 6 years of team sizes at those schools. Because to me, if what we're trying to do is to take a scalpel essentially to other pieces of the budget that the administration feels are significant to achieve a change of 1 student per class, to me, I think that's not worth it. So I think I need more information about the context of these class size issues to be able to make that judgment call, which I understand is the judgment call we as a supervising body make. So I think that's where I'm stuck.
So I'm glad you said that, Kathy. I wasn't thinking of it in terms that way. So just to be clear, I do believe that the charter maintenance, the 400, plus $1,000 achieves page 1, achieves critical elementary class sizes. Everybody is on the same page there. It brings the reason for the strings, like I said, allowed us with that additional 400 plus $1,000 to take care of the priority items. I also am concerned that, and I want to remind everybody, I felt very strongly that when our assistant superintendents went and met with principals, met with their department heads, they were looking at the student experience and making sure that things remain. And that's why, again, across the board, we made cuts again that we did not want to make. I was clear with what I said probably an hour ago about what it really does to our schools, and we have real concern. But to go back now, and I hear you, the 782,000 to look at the top part of the priorities, which again are the class sizes, are going to impact some other part of the budget. So I will have to go back immediately and again start to take a look at how we don't affect the student experience. I'm not sure how. Paul, you mentioned IT. Today I needed to get something from IT who have been wonderful to me with my inability to sometimes access my equipment. But my point is they're out across the district with MCAS. I mean, I would be really careful. And again, I know you're giving me kind of an opportunity to go back to all departments and take a look. So I will get that information, Kathy, or if the school committee determines the last 5 or 6 years, what you're asking is the team sizes and really the impact of the reductions we've made versus where we were the past couple of years. That is what you're saying to me.
Yes. That's what I'd like to understand.
All right, folks, we have a number of hard stops, myself, Kathy, and Chris included. We have a bargaining session at noon, and Jill. Cove.
I mean, I do feel like it's a little bit unfair to ask Kathy and her team to go back when they have already made their best recommendations to us onto how to do it, unless we have suggestions. And I know it doesn't sound like we're going to finish this discussion today, but I think that given the facts, we also need to reconsider reinstating the strings then, because I personally, as much as I realize it's a really valued program, it doesn't seem to rise to the level of the classroom size. So I think that we need to keep those things on the table. I feel a bit uncomfortable telling the team to go back and look at it when they've already done that and they've given us their recommendations. So unless we have specific, I don't particularly agree with Paul's suggestion of taking it from the IT, but I think at least it's a targeted place for them to look, but just telling them to go back and look at everything, they've done that. So unless we have guidance for them, I don't know how helpful that is.
Thanks, Cove. Emily?
I was just going to say, I second what Kathy Shields said and also what you said, Superintendent, but what Kathy is, I think we need to understand exactly what bang for the buck we're getting in terms of the class sizes on page 2. And if it's only 1 or 2 students a class, I think we need to seriously think about whether or not it's worth upending the apple cart. I also think that if we do want to look at IT, which I like Cove, I do not want to look at IT, but I think that it may help this body make a decision by better understanding the important role that the ITS has in all the school buildings, not just MCAS. So
last word. Go ahead, Rajiv.
So completely agree and understand what you're saying in terms of the challenges. I am comfortable asking Superintendent Smith, and I know this puts her in a tough position of going back and looking at this, of looking just on page 2, as we've talked about, just the $782,000 and coming back to us with what would be cut and the impact of those scalpel cuts on the student experience in order to find $782,000 for the classroom teachers that we're talking about on page 2. I don't think that makes it a done deal in any way, because I think there are critical questions like how much does this move the needle? Do the other very targeted reductions have a significant impact on other aspects of the student experience, potentially outside of the classroom? But I would like to see that, because at this point, what we are prioritizing is kind of the one thing we can, right, given the budget situation. And I think it's the right thing. I agree with everyone on that. But possibly the ask would be if you can come back to us and say, if we were to find $768,000, here's what else would be gone.
So there are two paths, I think. Paul, if you would table your motion, we could pick it up on Thursday. I think then we'd probably need to schedule a second meeting of the school committee, probably for Friday, if we can all do that, so that we can vote on some of these things. And the reason I'm throwing it to you, Paul, and putting it in your hands is because it sounds as though it would be helpful to have some additional information in order to fully consider your motion, your amended motion.
Right. I don't think I have to formally table it because we're out of time anyway.
Well.
So let's just let it hang. And if Kathy can do what Rajiv has suggested, I think then we'll have an informed discussion on the motion and also what Kathy has suggested.
I've gotten not reprimanded, dinged in the past for leaving open motions at the end of meetings. So it would be much more to my liking if you table your motion.
Move to table until Thursday's meeting.
Perfect. All right. Is there a second on that tape? Thank you, Chris. Just a show of hands. We're literally, all right, great. Thank you. Cove, I didn't see your hand, but now I do. So that was unanimous, Lisa. All right, everyone. With that, we've concluded our posted business for this morning's meeting. Our next meeting will be on Thursday, April 27th. We have a few things to continue, our FY24 discussion being one of them, and a social and emotional learning update. Thank you to central staff and a thanks to everyone who watched, and we appreciate it. Meeting adjourned.
Record.